Yes, indeed, it's true. TPOS is turning the people on, and maybe you don't know what TPOS is other than the fabulous cartoon luchador over my shoulder. First, I want to tell you who I am. You should know that already if you're tuned into this thing and you're watching. You know that I'm Malcolm Tent from Danbury, Connecticut, baby. One of three people pictured on this stunning vintage Trash American style t-shirt. I'm also the label head of TPOS and the host of Tent Talks Tunes, which is what we're doing right here, right now. At this moment, sort of a virtual live thing on the dreaded Facebook. Will be on my YouTube channel sooner or later. Go ahead and subscribe to that thing so you can see when I do get around to posting it. Also the star of my own solo album, The Multiple Moods of Malcolm Tent. I like to get the infomercial out of the way quickly. I have mercy on you people. But I do want to sell these things, man. These things are great. It's got 14 of my bands on it, dating from 1983 to the present day. It's on colored vinyl. I only made 500 of them, and they've been going very well, so don't forget to look it up on these two internet locations, Discogs and eBay. You can get them. If you don't want to do it Discogs or eBay, you can get them directly from me. That's my PayPal address. You can also send cold hard cash. Get a bunch of $1 bills, tie them up in a bundle, drop them into a shoebox, and mail to P.O. Box 3626 Newtown, Connecticut 06470. I won't regret it. The odds are that you won't regret it. One thing I definitely do not regret in any way, shape, or form, something in fact that I'm extremely happy about right now, is that I've got someone sitting right there in the hot seat who I've been wanting to talk to for a long time about music, the business, the past, the present, the future. A dude who was a righteous shaker and mover in the Danbury music scene for a long, long time. I'm referring to none other than Mr. Greg Vegas. Hello, Greg.
Hello, Mr. Malcolm.
Good to be here, man. How's life treating you these days?
Stuck in a room with records. It can't be too bad, right? Considering we're healthy and good, keeping busy, working, not really doing any music these days, but it's all good.
The fact that we're here to talk about it says volumes.
Exactly. You have to take that kind of, even that level we have to take, as a plus,
Definitely. So I've been doing these interviews now for several months, and I keep thinking about people I want to talk to because there's so many unanswered questions about so many things. And one topic that gets mentioned a lot peripherally, but I've never been able to dig into with anybody, is the Danbury scene, the bands in it, and since you were specifically in one of those bands, that band, which was Monsterland. So I want to really dig into this and dissect the history of it and get into it and do the whole tale, man. Get the whole thing laid out on the table for all to see. Think you can handle that, Greg Vegas?
Well, yeah, what I can remember, I will try, I have to drink my magic liquid to help me remember.
Oh, right on. That looks like it's might be at least as good as this great big
I feel it all coming back right now.
Awesome. And I've got my Sandy Hook tap water. We're both in pretty good shape right now.
I mean, in 10 years we might be in trouble, whatever, but still.
So, late 80s, early 90s. Very, very exciting time for music, although I don't think any of us really knew about it, I mean, nobody thought that grunge rock and alt rock were just around the corner, and terms like the next Seattle hadn't quite been invented yet, but there was a lot going on. I never even
heard of Seattle at that point. I didn't even heard of Seattle. Who knows?
Seriously, like maybe you heard of the Melvins or something like that, but maybe you didn't even know they were from Seattle or anywhere. I don't know. So it's just really weird that in all these places all around the country and the world, right around that exact same time, late 80s, early 90s, bands are starting to form. Certain kinds of bands are starting to form. There are certain similar ideas afoot. So maybe start telling us where you were in your perspective and how you got into the whole music thing around that time in Danbury, Connecticut, of all places.
Yeah, it is, and a couple of perspectives. I mean, perspective from now, but also perspective from then. I mean, I came to Danbury because I was in Milford. I went to college at Western Connecticut State University in '86. I was studying music there, playing saxophone. At that time, I was already interested in a lot of interesting music because what was really prevalent in Connecticut? College radio. We had PKN, which I grew up to listen to in Milford in the, when I was younger, like 83 to 86, I guess. And I listened to the jazz show because I was just a burgeoning, saxophone player. And then after the jazz show stopped, Capitol Radio started at PKN, which all of a sudden Dead Kennedys were being blasted. And I was like, oh, this is interesting music. So I was getting turned on all kinds of stuff. And also we had MTV, you're watching MTV and then there's late night shows and there's a Residence video playing. Oh, that's interesting. I don't really like this other stuff, but I like all this other, things and that are these weird bands are playing. So I think there's a lot of stuff that was sort of feeding our brains and luckily in Danbury I had this amazing station, WXCI, which was, really playing all kinds of different stuff between Daryl Ort's show and then the regular new wave stuff. And, so when I got there in '86, I mean, I was like, you couldn't ask for a better time to get to a scene, right? And this is a scene is something that I think is like these days is, hard to even think about in the digital world of global music, right? Where things are just distributed instantly across the world that, wow, you heard a song on the radio, you're like, what is that? I didn't have a phone to Shazam it. I had to actually like, what is that? I got to go to the record store in New Haven or whatever. And then you find out like, oh, that was the church. And you're going to get that in 3 weeks when we get the import come in or something like that, right? So like the hunt for music was there, but we were getting fed this stuff. So anyway, I end up in Danbury and immediately I'm on the radio station and just, that's my main thing is like, was being involved with that. And I was also, a musician, but I quickly wanted to play guitar and play Jesus and Mary Chain kind of guitar and all that stuff. And I learned from like a kid in the dorm, taught me basic chords and it was like, okay, I can make noise, ready to go. Right. And, and then you keep meeting these people. And then, the scene around then was like, you had these, all of a sudden the record stores open. What was that record store in Danbury called? Oh, there's the t-shirt, Trash America Style. There it was. Yeah. 1986, but also another one opened too, right? In Brookfield, right? You had, what's the Brookfield store? Brookfield store.
Jerosa,
same time, right? You guys opened around the same time.
Yeah, I think within about 2 weeks of each other, actually, in late '86.
So I always use this example. I tell this story all the time, but like, how does scenes start, right? And I think you had this catalyst of like, MTV was broadcasting all this stuff, and there was definitely the They Might Be Giants or whatever, the Replacements, whatever would sneak on the radio that was cool. I mean, on MTV was cool, and all those British bands. Then then you had these radio stations that were like college rock was huge. It was like a huge thing, and in the record stores, I mean, you had a counterculture store. There was the kind of go against Jerosa's a little bit more. Well, other older counterculture store in the sense that, but at the same time, we all fed into each other. So there all of a sudden was like a couple colleges and a bunch of us adventurous types that were just trying to make music. And next thing you know, you fall into people in a scene like yourself, or I meet Tom Monahan and, Ernie Latanzio and Jim Roberto and all these crazy creeps, that are like, these guys are cool. I want to hang out with them, and we kind of learned something, I guess. So that's really the catalyst of, I guess, anybody's scene. But it was really interesting to think about any one of those pieces fell apart, meaning like radio stations or record stores, like there wouldn't have been anything. Now, there really wasn't any venues except for maybe, Anthrax, of course, was doing this thing, but there wasn't anything in Danbury, right? That's for sure.
No, like even the Anthrax had to drive 45 minutes down to Norwalk, if you wanted to catch a show there.
And yeah, so I think that's really where it started. I remember basically meeting people at the school. So the college being a big part of it for me, but an interest in this kind of new music and being a part of it. And, I never think I ever thought of myself as like playing guitar in a band, but being involved with the music was really key. But like, meeting people like Daryl or, and yourself and like, okay, there's some interesting stuff going on here that, that we can create our own thing,
Well, it's really interesting how you talk about that, the genesis of a scene. It really was about the different hubs, And I don't think we could ever underplay the importance of WXCI, because WXCI 91.7 in Danbury at the time was a powerhouse radio station when there was such a thing as college radio, and college radio really was a force for pushing new music and breaking new bands. And for a little while, there was this really beautiful 2 or 3 year window when college radio absolutely was a force for that, and
Yes.
XCI was right there.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I grew up in Milford, where I had WNHU, which you know
Oh
well,
yeah,
and I
NHU.
grew up listening to, like, hearing, like, I remember always hearing Robin Hitchcock and, the Reducers and all those bands, and then I would listen to PKN, as I said before, like the jazz, and all of a sudden, like, other kind of bigger stuff, and then XCI was around, but I actually was also, influenced a bit by LIR, which was the other side of the water in Long Island, which is really the new wave king, right? We really broke bands, but XCI kind of mirrored that a little bit, because it all kind of fed into each other, right? So it was like, there's a whole thing. And so XCI became a powerhouse because it was a bit more organized than most, I guess, college freeform stations. There was it was actually kind of putting bands in rotation. And so, the music industry was paying attention to them and giving music and giving interviews and stuff. So it definitely was a powerhouse in that way. It was like what I could say, the Pitchfork, or the blogs of today. Like that's what we were, right? We were like the Pitchfork of its day. Like you had, Robert Fripp would stop up at the station, and, like, you named the band, everyone kind of came up there, right? So yeah, being part of that was a big thing. But the reality was, you have these. I was such a, like, so incensed of, like, finding, Daryl's Adventure Jukebox Show, which was like all these obscure bands he was playing. Oh, this Butthole Surfers is really interesting. And then there was, like, all the other bands that sound like Butthole Surfers, and here's a band called the Cows or whatever, right? It was just all these. So XCI would play certain things, but I was, like, taking the throwaway records they didn't want, that were finding all the weird stuff, like Half Man Half Biscuit record that came in from England, no one knew what to do with. And then I ended up doing a radio show, in like '89 after Daryl left, but it was really about that. And it was like the sort of like the scene of the 7-inches that were coming out, which is basically we became part of. Like, everyone was printing their own, it was like recording on 4 tracks and making their, hey, what's that? What's that?
Special cameo by Harry the Cat, who is now going to say goodbye. Goodbye, Harry.
Hi, Harry. So yeah, I mean, it's like it's really unique, and I think, but it was also about feeding off each other too. So there was definitely bands that were playing already. I guess there wasn't a ton, but there was all of a sudden, very quickly, right? Think about it now, very quickly, there was all of a sudden 10 bands that were, like, doing stuff. Now, all of them didn't exist very long, but mutated into other things. Tom, I met Tom Monahan, who was a bass player and singer in Monsterland. I met, I think, the same time as Ernie Latanzio from Head, and they were, I think at the time, they were kind of messing around as Closet Full of Fear, right? I think that's how I remember, maybe. And anyway, just kind of met, and at the same time as, there was, so that we kind of clicked, and it was kind of, that's Closet Full of Fear was my first kind of band I played in that scene. It was like there was, like, I was invited to be part of that, much as Ray Hoffmiller was also from Head, and we were just making noise in Newtown and the house that Tom and Ernie lived in, and screwing around and played some gigs, and it was like, kind of industrial noise things, so it was definitely, the start of, like, oh, okay, this is cool. I don't really have to know what I'm doing, but we're making some entertainment for people, making some music in our own way.
Yeah, I remember very clearly, and I don't want to get too far ahead of the story as far as Monsterland goes, but the early stuff you did, especially the guitar, was more of a textural thing. You weren't just playing, like, lots of chords and noodly riffs and whatnot. You were always doing more like big washes of sound and soundscapes and these jagged waves of guitar noise. So would that be
well, it's because I didn't know how to play chords, and that's how it came out. I mean,
right
kind of probably what it was, but I guess it was like, yeah, like fooling around with effects pedals and stuff, but, like, I guess maybe listening to some of those, British, I was definitely very influenced by the British bands, more so than local, like, hardcore scene or something like that. But I was always fascinated. How do you make this guitar, which you normally think about BB King or something like that, make this like unworldly sound, right? That was always exciting to me. Like, how do I make this unworldly sound? So like, it wasn't about just doing power chords and riffs and stuff like that, which, end up figuring out how to do, but that's basically what it was. It's like kind of like hiding behind that wash of like distortion or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Which actually worked out perfectly because Tom's bass style is so melodic and so based on the notes and the chord progressions, but still had that edge, that real nasty edge to it.
Yeah, Tom was playing chords, and he wasn't. Again, I think he was learning it as well. And the idea of, like I always said, like, we were really a 4-piece that, but only in a 4, 2 guitars, bass and drums, but only have 1 guitar player and a bass player to play chords. So we kind of play. We sounded bigger than we were because the way we kind of intertwined our sounds. I think that was probably the unique part of us is it's like. It was like a somewhere between, like taking Husker Du and shoegaze, but, without even intentionally trying to do that. It was just like, well, we wanted to sound big, but there's only 3 of us in the room. So how do we make it sound bigger,
Yeah. Yeah. Like I can just say for myself personally as a bass player, Tom was the first guy who I ever saw play like chords on the bass.
Yeah.
And that was like,
Same here. I mean, it was like, that was like, it's like, okay, cool. But it didn't really, to me, I wasn't even, being a guy who kind of I studied saxophone and, that was my main instrument. And again, when I started learning guitar, it was like, okay, I learned the chords, but it was really about like, I want to make that Jesus Mary chain feedback. And I want to hear, and then seeing that, the bass chord thing was really exciting, but because you can add a lot to it. So I think I was always kind of fascinated by that, how we just sort of like, found the right little window to do our thing, be creative, but we grew with it. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we kind of like, you can hear it over the course of the singles and stuff, how we kind of like were developing our thing,
Yeah, I was actually listening, and we're going to get into the singles in depth probably a little bit later. I think I've got every single thing you guys ever did. And when you play the singles chronologically, it's absolutely there. And not only in terms of like the musicianship and the knowledge of the studio, but also in terms of production and mastering and things like that. There's a complete upward curve from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. Again, being where we ended up now, being Tom, being the producer and what he's infamous producer and well known for that. I mean, he was the guy that kind of understood that sonic level right away. I think even when it was like working on Tascam 4 tracks, and moving to 8 tracks and moving to 1-inch tape. But reality is like making the biggest sound we can make with the little resources, which we all did, like we all had to do back then because you couldn't afford a studio. And if you did, they probably didn't understand what to do anyway. It was always the problem. We went into a studio, never really worked out because it was like, that sucked because the guy tried to make you sound like, Jimi Hendrix or something like that. Right.
Yeah. Or Santana or something like that.
We had the DIY, the thing is like, these tools are in our hands and, luckily someone like Tom's, talent of like figuring that out and, those like how to do, bouncing down tracks and that kind of stuff. I find it really fascinating is like, maybe I kind of feel sad for some of the young artists now who don't understand that when they're like layering 140 tracks on their laptop and just like record everything, but never have to really kind of edit, it's like the edit process is not there. So like, there's something about like those people who learned, all of us who learned back then of like how to do stuff with so little and making that little 4-track cassette that sound, make it sound like this massive thing, we learned, it was a real lesson for us. And I think in the future, how we do things.
No, definitely. And it kind of underlies too, how much of this great music was made under, you could almost say less than ideal circumstances, very difficult circumstances, because the one thing I always measured it by, being the store owner and the business guy and the label guy was cost. It's like blank cassettes cost money. When you graduate to reel to reel tape cost a lot of money. Good microphones cost a lot of money. And so you had to factor all these equations in. If you wanted to go to a studio, that cost a lot of money. And so your creativity, you had to be very careful with it. You had to be very judicious with what you actually made because your resources were probably really limited.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and again, it goes back to DIY thing, and I hold that ethic to this day. And I was having a conversation in the project I'm working on now, and it's like, I have a budget, but I'm afraid to spend it because I feel like it's a waste. Because I can do this myself, like we can do, and the fact that like I still work that way. But like I think we all kind of come from that, like, like we'll just kind of figure out how to make this work, but you can make it work in your own way and become really unique about it. That makes it special. Because if we had unlimited money and all this stuff, like then most people who came from that just really don't really. The results aren't really that great because they're just doing whatever you're supposed to do, right? Oh yeah, I got to hire this guy and I'm going to go to this fancy studio and blah, blah, blah. And then it's just like, sounds like everything else. But if you're really trying to be inventive, I think there's something to be said about like being tasked, like, okay, make a record on 4-track with a 5-piece band on cassette, go, and people did it all day, and it worked, it was like, now, I mean, the fidelity is not really an issue. It's more like what makes it sound interesting,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that, what makes something interesting is knowing what your individual limitations are. It's like, you got to know what your skills are, and you have to know what you really can't do, and then take what you can't do somewhere else and have somebody do that for you, or go to a facility where you can do something that's kind of beyond your reach, which I think also ends up for a more interesting sound because you throw more diverse creative elements into the mix.
Yeah. It's and I think that's where, I think we were all learning from each other too. Tom quickly was the guy who had the 4-track and then started recording, Head and other bands. And it was like, you just kind of do better job every time you do it and learn from it. And I think that's where, and we were always writing and recording songs and re-recording them, and trying to get better at them, and and I think eventually you start challenging. The great thing about scenes too, like you have people that, even your buddies are sort of challenging each other. Like oh shit, those guys are playing there. Oh, we should play there too. Oh, those guys released a 7. Oh, we should do one too. All that kind of stuff. I think that's where the most fertile stuff. And I think that's really what happened. Like we had all of a sudden, there was almost a dozen bands or something, like people doing stuff and had outlets, and you challenge each other to do things, and everybody did it different ways. I think we kind of got lucky, I guess, and found our little niche, and the word got out.
Yeah, I always likened it, if you want to make things really simple and encapsulate things in my own mind as far as Danbury goes, I always viewed Head as being the Stones and Monsterland as being the Beatles.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example. It's like, Blur or Oasis or whatever, but yeah, I mean, Head was definitely, so, Clouds Full of Fear, was doing her thing. And I think right then it was like, for whatever year or whatever it was, but now all of a sudden Head was forming. But I was like, for a second, there was a band called, I think I played with like, it was like Jim and Rob Drive on drums, and me. It was called Clockwork Wizards. We had a shit, like we played a little bit, and then all of a sudden Head became a thing, and they were playing, and I think Tom and I were sitting around making songs, but we also were doing Buick from Hell, which was our little tape project on the XCI, and I think we tried to do it live a few times, but it didn't really work, but released a couple cassettes and that kind of thing, but that we were kind of prepping ourselves to be, I guess, the songwriting guys and doing the power pop, punk noise, whatever the hell we were. And it was kind of an easy transition, I guess. And so I guess we did it simultaneously, but it was all kind of this creative energy that we were working on all the time.
Yeah, I remember. And just to give the people the reference point, just to reiterate, Closet Full of Fear was you, Greg.
Yeah, it was mainly Tom and Ernie Latangio, and then Ray Hoffmiller, who was in Head, and then myself. And I think that was it. Maybe someone else played at one point, or drums or something. But
wow, so it's a veritable super group. 2 guys branch off to be in Monsterland.
Well, it wasn't super yet. It was a pre-super group. It was before we were super.
And 2/3 of Monsterland and half of Head. That's pretty super, I think. That's just super.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Good stuff. I mean, those guys. I mean, Ernie and Tom really really opened my eyes. Like, just really, turned me on to all kinds of music. And we were listening to, back then it was like the Tones on Tail and like Jesus Mirror Chain, whatever kind of came through. Mostly a lot of English stuff, right? Killing Joke, whatever, right? But I think what happened at XCI was like we got filtered so much music that I was involved with. I was there all the time that I would be like playing Tom. Oh, did you hear this band? Did you hear this band Belter Space? Did you hear this band Stone Roses? And like before anybody else, we were kind of like way on top of it, and whatever else came through, and that kind of fueled us to like make new sounds, and that would go into whatever Head was doing and whatever we were doing. So that, again, part of that scene where just like kind of stuff was floating around, and we were all taking little bits and pieces of it and trying to do our own thing,
Yeah.
And I remember going, we played shows at the Anthrax. I mean, our first show was '89. Actually, Night Shift Cafe was our first show, I think.
Yeah.
Which
Way
is
the hell at Naugatuck of all places.
Yeah, it was interesting because, like, we got to remember, like, Boston was probably the hottest scene, right, in the East Coast. It was like this, it was like, I mean, all these bands were like, everyone was, Boston was Dinosaur Jr., and, it was just, was the East Coast, but they, nobody thinks about Boston as a scene, but there was so much happening. But a lot of bands in Europe would come there first, right, play there and, like, plant down. And so, but Naugatuck being between New York City and Boston was like smack dab in the middle. God bless Fernando Pinto for listening to me to book a bunch of shows. And when he called about giving away tickets, like when all of a sudden, like Gun Club, Monsterland's opening up or at the time it was Smile. We weren't Monsterland, it was Smile.
Yeah, and that was the first show, was when you guys opened up for the Gun Club, if I recall correctly.
Our first show was actually playing with Ganufa's birthday party at Night Shift. Oh. That was Meg had a birthday. Our friend Meg had a birthday party. Ganufa's and Smile played. I think that was September '89. I have the flyer. I'll look it up, but I haven't. But anyway, then a couple weeks later, I think we played with Gun Club, or it was either Gun Club or Verlaine. Gun Club and then the Verlaines. So like we played 3 shows at Night Shift within a couple of months. I think the Verlaines was November, and the Verlaines was like their first or second ever U.S. show. But then we also played in Naugatuck, in Norwalk at the Anthrax a few times. Yeah. So we played with, like, I think we did a show with Christian Death. We did it at the same time. And we did a show with that, and I think it was like a couple hardcore. Then we played a show with 7 Seconds. I mean, it was a weird mishmash of stuff. It was, we were like 2 twee for the hardcore scene and 2 hardcore for the twee kind of stuff, right? So we were kind of in between there. So it was never, didn't quite find our thing, but we were pretty active pretty quickly, mainly because luckily I was, in cahoots with Fernando at Night Shift. So I basically got my pick of shows that we got to open for. And I would DJ there a lot. So that's why. But that was a really interesting scene because there was a lot of cool stuff that was happening there. And it was kind of, New Haven was sort of like in a weird spot, but then it all kind of moved into Haven after that, like pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well,
so New Haven became more of a hub for a while. We played probably more at New Haven more than anywhere, even Danbury, because at the time there wasn't many places to play,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Danbury never, ever, ever had a venue, we had the Chameleon for a short period of time. And I remember you guys put together a couple of shows at WestCon here and there. We do shows at the store, but we weren't a venue. There wasn't anywhere regular to play, which makes the Danbury scene that much more interesting because we were still thriving that way for a long time before there was anything resembling a real venue.
It was it was back to that DIY kind of like hardcore matinee show kind of vibe where there's a lot of like halls are rented type thing, And I think eventually, WestCon was great. We were able to do some shows in the Student Center. Craig was doing stuff, Craig Colarusso, with China Pig was playing. But, by the time we got to the early 90s, it was a lot of activity. There was the Chicken Coop for a short period of time. There was Danbury Music Center, shows at your store. And there was a, kind of weird little spaces to play, right? I think it wasn't really until, I guess when I was booking stuff with the TKs, that became kind of a regular place, which was like, sports bar in the back of the room, but that would kind of became a thing for a while, a little bit later. But yeah, but 89, 90 was pretty tough. There wasn't a lot of stuff. So and we did those shows at the snack bar at WestCon were great, because there was not much to do, but it was awesome. We were just like making noise and nobody really bothered us. It was cool, Mm-hmm. But then we had to go to New Haven. We had to go to, Naugatuck or, wherever else we had to go. But it was, it kept us busy traveling anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And that what you're saying kind of underlines once again the importance that WestCon, which is Western Connecticut State
Yeah,
University, for those of you who don't know, how important WestCon was, because not only because of the radio station and because of all the kindred spirits who went there, but because you/we were usually able to find a room somewhere. I remember we did shows in a conference room up on the second floor of the student center for a
yeah,
while, and the snack bar, and the radio station would have an occasional live broadcast. And there's just always, it seemed like there's always somewhere at WestCon where you could sneak in and do a gig
yeah.
for a
Yeah, and I was
while.
like, I mean, it was kind of like always trying to remind myself what was going on then, and you find there is a video of us playing. I think it's '92, like at WestCon, a show where there's a few videos of us playing live. Is from then, in the classic room. But it was like, we became friendly with bands. It was like, oh, or, we got this band from North Carolina, Vanilla Trainwreck, or who, there's like the Lilies or Polvo, or whoever. We just had, all of a sudden we had, bands passing through, we made friends with. And, it was like that. And I think it was interesting because I said Anthrax was really important. They'd always give us shows, but it was, it definitely wasn't really, the indie kind of rock vibe was, we needed, it was too big of a room in some ways, you needed to play. There was occasional, there's good shows there, and those guys were always great, putting us on a bill. But I think it wasn't until we started to do the WestCon shows, we kind of felt like there was our own little scene, it was a little hybrid of, the indie rock and the hardcore and then, the noise,
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing you guys when you opened up for 7 Seconds at the Anthrax, and I thought it was going to be a really interesting night because I was wondering, well, how is Monsterland going to go over? But what was really key was that 7 Seconds were really morphing into a much more melodic sort of band, and they already had their hardcore, pardon the pun, following, who were sort of morphing along with them. And then when
yeah.
you guys hit the stage, I remember you guys went over really well. And I think you made a lot of fans that night.
Yeah, I think it was, again, I remember being concerned, but I actually at that time knew that the seven, I was never really a 7 Seconds fan, but I was like, I heard that, knew, okay, they're doing some melodic stuff. This could work, kind of thing. I mean, I don't think we fit really well with Christian Death maybe, but, same time as like, I'm sure we could have made just enough noise to make it work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was an interesting thing. We were able to kind of play with kind of anyone. And I think, it was even interesting because like one of the, I think the last shows we did is under the name Smile. We played with Ultra Vivid Scene in New Haven, right? And who we actually recorded later with Kurt Ralsky. We ended up doing our EP with the Loser Friendly EP was recorded with him later. But but playing with Ultra Vivid, I was a huge fan of that band. But like being able to play with that show, and I'm sure we were probably terrible or something, but whatever. But it was like, I don't remember all those, but we kind of play with everyone. Like Gun Club, Verlaine, 7 Seconds, Christian Death. I mean, Dust Devils. I mean, the list of bands we play with is kind of crazy, and we kind of would just always say yes in a sense, just because we're like, oh, why not, I always pretty much liked everything in some ways. I was always a band. I'd like, you have to like, oh, I know that 7 Inch. That's great. Let's play with them. Could have been permanent to anyone. We would have made it work. Right. So yeah, we were pretty, we would always kind of venture out. And then eventually we started playing, I guess, whatever, wherever we could find a show. I don't remember when the first time we played Manhattan, or Boston, but it was like, probably like 91, 92, we started to venture out a bit more, but it was really kind of just really local, Connecticut stuff.
Yeah. So just to get back a little bit more toward the development and the origins of the band. So you and Tom were already in Closet Full of Fear, and then you guys are both at the radio station doing Buick from Hell, and you're already hanging out. You got guitars and basses. Enter, I'm going to guess, Chris Mitchell on drums.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember where I met Chris. I think it might have been through the Chameleon Club or something like that. I remember him playing with another band there.
Hmm.
I don't remember what band it was, but yeah, I mean, yeah, Chris was like all of a sudden, a really amazing drummer that was like interested in playing with us. It was like, whoa, okay. It was just like kind of blew my mind that someone would be that interested. I think there were definitely quite a few good drummers in the scene at that time, but yeah, I don't quite remember. I think it was, remember the Chameleon Club we met when after he had a band he played with, and I was there, and I think somehow we just we were looking for the next step of like putting our bedroom stuff we were recording to actually being a band, And it was he was pretty. It must have been pretty seamless because I don't remember. I remembered like, playing shows and recording and stuff like that pretty quickly. Um, yeah, Chris was a fascinating drummer. He's a fascinating drummer.
Yeah, he's I remember to this day I remember the first time I ever met him. He had come into the store one day, Trash America style, and he was looking for something, but he could not articulate what it was he was looking for. And I'm like, who is this guy? What is his deal? What's going on? I couldn't figure the dude out because he just couldn't express what it was he wanted. It was really weird. But he kept coming back in, and eventually sort of turned out that he was a drummer. And I seem to recall he was in some kind of cover band for.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was a cover band. I think I saw him playing it.
Yeah. And okay, he's a drummer. He's in a cover band. Okay. And somehow it morphed into him joining forces with you and Tom. And the first time I went to go see you guys, which was in the basement of Fudd's place in Brookfield, and the first time I saw him actually play, it was like, whoa.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that famous. I did. That's that basement show. Yeah, we had a great situation too. I just forget about this. Like, we had a great situation. We had a place to play and jam and do shows, right? And that's the hardest. I always say, like, how do bands make it? Like, well, you got to have a fucking place to play that doesn't cost you a fortune, right? Like, and that we were really lucky being in that house in Brookfield, right? And I think we talked about this last year or so. Like, there, you recorded that show, which I hope you never release. I'm sure, but it was our first playing, and I had no hair because I had a shaved head, and it's like. I think we're playing some covers. I don't know. It was like 3 songs or something like that, right? But yeah, it was like our first show with, I think Onion played, and it was some other local band. But it was a house party gig, So that was the start of it. And I think that's when Tom was living at that house at that time, or was just about to, or something like that. But yeah, it was yeah, it definitely was our moment. Like, yeah, Mitchell was definitely the force that we needed to kind of like give us the the confidence to. Okay, now we can kind of focus on the other ethereal stuff and the vocals and the melodies.
He is. I've said this to anybody who will listen. I will say the best drummer, just organic, raw, no effort necessary drummer I've ever worked with in Connecticut. And pick a location.
Yeah, he's just a natural. Like, just doesn't he can just do it.
Yeah, phenomenal. And I remember this one time. This is like 6 or 7 years ago, I guess. He was actually playing a show with this band, and the show wasn't going very well. And it ended up where he finished playing the set with a drum solo, this really long drum solo. And I'm just like watching him play this drum solo, and it's just going on and on and on, but it's moving, it's melodic, it's musical, it's this like epic drum solo. It probably went on like maybe 8 or 9 minutes, and he finished it and he came off the stage. I was like, dude, that was amazing. And he said, oh yeah, that was my angry drum solo, because I'm really angry right now.
Yeah, that sounds like him. Yeah, exactly. He's just like, his emotion was really, true emotional player. He's great. So we definitely kind of kicked it off in gear that, and we were off and running once we got him behind it. And I think we just again, I have to go back and look. You have time, like, man, we had a lot of songs we did. Like, we just kind of, Tom was always writing. He was the main writer, and I think we'd always then collaborate on stuff. And but it was like, once we kind of got that rolling and playing some gigs, it was just like songs were just coming all the time. And then, the next thing you know, there's a 7-inch out, and then there's another one, and then bum. Or we had the cassette, I think we put out first, the Smile tape, right?
Yep.
And I mean, that seems to still resonate today. I still hear people talk about, oh, I had that in my car forever, And my favorite story of this too, I love the Smile tape, is like, I mean, you had that tape for years, and we were kind of selling it to trash, because where else would you sell it? There was no eBay, there was no Bandcamp. You just kind of, But I remember, like, I think what happened is, like, the dubs got slower and slower. Like, basically, so I was in the car with my brother. This is maybe 20 years ago or more, and he's like, maybe 25 years ago, and it was like late after Monsterland broke up, right? And I'm like, what is this? He's like, listen to that tape, but it was really slow. So, but basically, people got like a slower version of all those songs. We kind of sound like the Melvins doing punks. And actually, there's somewhere online, someone has like on YouTube a rip of it. And if you listen to what's supposed to be versus the versions, it was just like, oh, this sounds really weird and sludgy. But it was basically because it was like the dubs were like just a bit slower all the time. And some people are like, wow, I never heard these songs like this when they finally put this stuff up online. So that's one of the things. One day we'll get all that up there. But that Smile tape was kind of legendary because it was like out there for a while. But and then we did the 7-inch, which was a TPOS split record, right? The first
TPOS, one. Baby. Well, yeah. Let's see. We're sort of getting into this territory now. Because you guys you did do that, man. The way you released records and stuff was a completely linear, logical progression. You went from the demo tape to a 7-inch to another 7-inch. So yeah, why don't we? I actually have over here, just ever so slightly out of reach, because I wasn't getting ready for this, but I do believe I don't have an actual cassette of the Smile tape anymore.
Hold on, I got
one. All right, yeah. Let's do a little show and tell here, because this is a visual medium after all, and we can't.
It's actually behind it'll be a bit of work, so I
yes.
I do have it.
I had all the original artwork.
You're so pretty, you should be shot.
Yes, exactly, and that was for those of you out there who don't remember. And I've talked about this on prior shows, the demo tape was like one of the most valuable tools that a band had for getting stuff out. Like if you couldn't afford to press a record, or you didn't have enough songs, or you didn't have the production facilities, you could always make a demo cassette and photocopy some artwork.
I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to get it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this. That the demo cassette was an absolutely legitimate way to break your band and to get the music out there. Once again, like in a pre-Bandcamp, pre-Discogs, pre-internet anything, the only way to get your music out there was to have something physical that you could give to somebody, sell at a gig, sell at the local record store, which, Trash American style.
It's buried. I can't get it. So it's buried. So.
Gosh dang it. I have the insert. Okay, now you tell something to the people. I
just moved them to like a hot way up there, but it'd take me a bit to get it. So
I got it. I don't have the cassette, but I do have the
artwork,
the original sheets.
So that was the high tech computer generated Monsterland logo, of course.
Yeah.
It's like, but that was and of course, yeah, there you go. There's the image of the Smile. So we were called Smile. So let's Smile up until I guess 91-ish. When we ended up finding there was 40 bands called Smile at the same time. So we came up with Monsterland. But yeah, that was the first one.
Yep, the November of '89. Recorded by Tom and Ernie Screwy Latanzio in Jim Roberto's basement, 4 tracks and a prayer, mixed by Tom and Greg. And this has Get Out of My Head, Crash, She's Got a Gun, twice at the end, and I'm Telling You. That's a pretty good tape, man.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. But again, we've teased this before, but we've been sort of slowly working on it. But I hope very, very soon we actually will have all this stuff properly digitized and living on the interwebs for proper viewing. And maybe we'll have both the slow version and the fast version. I don't know, but just for posterity's sake. But yeah, I mean, it's I was trying to make a list of all the stuff we put out, and not even including the cassette, but there's so many. We were just moving pretty fast. There was a lot of music coming out of us, and except for twice at the end, I think there's a couple recordings of that. We never quite were 100% with that song, but we just kind of did it and moved on. Right? We didn't do a lot of re-recording and new versions and stuff. There was only a few songs we did that with.
Yeah.
There's so much of it. I was trying to. If I was going to do the box set, it'd have to be 3 CDs, because there's so much music, but now, you know, obviously with digital, we can kind of figure it out, but like, you know, trying to put it all into a format, physical format, there's a lot of stuff, you know, I forgot about how much we were doing.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we got that 7-inch came out, and that was like early 91, right?
I can tell you exactly. See, now I'm prepared. Now that I got the
Did
cassette,
your homework.
got that out of the folder. Yeah, did my homework, and we do have right here a split between my label TPOS and Joe Snow, the estimable Joe Snow, Threshold Records. This is TPOS number 52.5. I would always get a 0.5 designation to records that I collaborated with somebody on.
Yep.
And it's the fabulous Monsterland Used to Smile.
Which is a, you know, yeah.
Great tune called Einstein originally, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Awesome song. And then the real power ballad, Nobody Loves You, on the Threshold side.
Which was re-recorded. That was one of those tracks we did re-record later.
Yeah.
On the proper big major label album.
We'll get to that in a minute. No specific. Actually, summer of 1990. We got the summer of 1990 on.
Okay, yeah. It's all blurred, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, what does the credits say there?
Well, let's see. Credits recorded at Tom's House. Tom's House, a Ford track.
Yeah.
Summer of 1990 by Monsterland and Screwy Ernie Latanzio.
Yep. Important part of the sound there.
Yeah, mixed by Tom and Greg. And that, of course, is Ernie from Head. You can see on Greg's shirt right there, the other great Danbury band. So you guys, you know, even though there was, and I'm just going to sidetrack for a second here, there might have been a perceived rivalry between Head and Monsterland, but you guys really, you were friends and you all worked pretty closely together.
Yeah, I don't know. Was there perceived rivalry? But yeah, we were literally, you know, hanging out all the time. It was like, you know, I think at each other's shows and stuff like that. And again, the times playing together. So I don't know if it was really a rivalry, but it was, again, I think it's that important part of a scene where like we all kind of grew and did our thing and challenged each other, right? You know, learned from recording. And Tom recorded all the Head stuff early days, you know, so
yeah,
totally different. You know, we totally had different styles. I mean, I was in awe of Jim Roberto's guitar playing. You know, he was just like, you know, he can smoke a cigarette, drink a beer, and still play, you know, 3 guitar solos at the same time, you know.
The famous beer chord, the beer chord.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, love those guys. So yeah, it was definitely that was the energy. You know, we had all this stuff going on, and then there was, you know, all these other bands. You know, the Bunny Brains were doing their thing, and you know, all of a sudden there was a whole slew of bands. You know, whether it was like Freak Baby and you know, everywhere there was a bunch. All of a sudden there was a bunch of bands. You know.
Yeah, and I will also mention too. I was going through my my tape archive. And I believe, if I have this correct, Head played their first ever show in September of '89, and you guys played your first ever show in July of '89. So
yeah.
it was you guys were really neck and neck in terms of being a band.
And you're kind of doing different things, you know. We definitely, I mean, again, Night Shift was a big place. We all played early around '89, and obviously Anthrax was the place because. And then I think by the time '90 came around, we started to try to figure out shows at WestCon, right? There was those kind of shows, right? The Wood Snack Bar and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you know, so we got the 7-inch comes out, all of a sudden, boom, wow, we got a record out, you know.
Yeah.
And then I guess then we had like we had some new stuff we're recording, and again, this is where it all becomes blurry. But besides the releases, but there was like another demo cassette that was kind of floating around, and then we had the next. I
don't remember.
Well, there was like versions. Basically, there's versions of these like there was like versions of like tapes, like 3-song tapes, and they kind of always mutate. I think they have the same artwork. So I found a lot of different versions of the same demo that was being thrown around at that time. But anyway, we're always recording.
Well, and this is a question I've always sort of had in the back of my mind, because you think about Head and Monsterland. You guys each ended up having completely different trajectories as far as, I hope you'll forgive the use of this word, careers as bands. You know, Head was more, I'm going to say like visceral in their approach, and maybe you guys are more cerebral in your approach. And the way you guys developed from demo tape to major label release, to me, just seems so logical and so linear. Was that a grand plan Were you guys like actually looking that forward ahead to do something like that?
Well, you know, I think we decided that we had an aesthetic we wanted to sound like, right? You know, so we wanted to be like, you know, be able to sound like the bands we love, right? You know, meaning make it, you know, bigger, you know, having access to studios or whatever. So, but you know, thank God Tom was able to do that on the 4 tracks and 8 tracks and stuff. But no, I don't think so. But I think, you know, we knew we weren't, you know, head, and, you know, they were like, you know, they were, yeah, a bit raw and like kind of just, you know, to me, they were like more butthole surfers than, you know, what we were trying to be. You know, I was really inspired by a lot of the New Zealand music going on at the time. So as much as I was inspired by the, you know, like the jangly stuff, but at the same time inspired by the shoegaze thing, you know, so that was like, I think probably the thing. So I don't know. I mean, it just became like, we just became really interested in just doing these sort of like pop songs in a bizarre way, you know? So no, I don't know. I don't think it was ever, but we definitely made an attempt to get out of the Danbury. Like, so that was our next step, was like, let's play the shows in New Haven. Let's do, you know, let's take any show we can get, right? You know, kind of, we weren't really like, you know, we were luckily I was able to tap into some great opening slots, you know, but I think we just started to challenge ourselves. And I always try to advise bands now, is like, you're always better off playing, you know, you learn a lot from playing a show in front of people who have no idea who you are, who are heckling you and throwing shit at you. It makes you so much better band than if you had all your friends cheering you on at every mistake you make, right? You know, it's like, you know, when you play to your same people all the time. So I think we made an effort to kind of just, let's go out, because we started playing a bunch of great shows where we kind of like, people were going to love us no matter what we did, right? Our girlfriends and friends, right? They're like, your mom, whatever, they're going to just love you. But once you're going to get out there and you put yourself into like that raw space of like, oh shit, we're in for trouble because we're playing, you know, this weird place that no one knows us and we're going to suck. But like when you actually can do it and like, wow, 5 people love this, maybe we are doing something right, you know? So that was probably the only, you know, it wasn't really a plan, but it was like, we decided like, hey, let's go try to play these things. So I think that was the attempt. And then we started to play out shows to like, we started reaching out to our friends in North Carolina, and, you know, we started taking road trips and stuff like that, you know, and, you know, which were fun and scary and all that stuff. But, you know, that's kind of how we, I think, became a better band, as we started like to really go out there and put our neck out. Like, okay, cool, Danbury, we love you, but, you know, you're going to love us no matter what we do. Let's go out there and do something, play in front of people who have no idea who we are. You know?
Yeah. How's it going to fly in Baltimore, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and sometimes it didn't work at all, you know, but that's kind of how it went. So, you know, it's like tough, because like, there's not I always thought we had a lot, you know, we practice a lot. We did a lot of practicing and stuff, but I think it's because we were, you know, probably not as proficient. I mean, not Chris Mitchell aside, but not as proficient as our instruments, but trying to get it down right, but also limited to 3 guys trying to make this big sound and work it out, you know. But, you know, I never thought we were a great live band, but, you know, there's like, that's the thing. You got to like try to be that, you know, you got to go out there and play all the time. We never really toured like, you know, a lot of these bands did. Like, we didn't play a lot of shows. We never really toured much, you know, did one tour of the US, but it wasn't even a full US tour, you know? But anyway, yeah, it's just like, those are the kind of things I always take away from it, is like, you know, we challenge ourselves to just to stick our neck out and try something different and come back. And I think that's what happened. Like I always, like, when you see a British band, I remember when I seen English bands the first time in US, like, oh my God, the British bands are so much better than US bands. Well, it's because they've been playing in England for 3 years and you hadn't seen them when they sucked, you know? It's like, we only see them when they're good, right? So, but the idea of like coming back home, and like, I remember hearing that, like, after playing a bunch of shows in Boston or wherever, you know, coming playing a show, like, wow, you guys are great, because we played 10 shows, you know, all of a sudden we're good because we just played 10 shows. You just didn't see the shitty 5 shows, you know.
Yeah, you pretty much almost in spite of yourself, you can't help but get better just by simply going out there and doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note too, and I really want to hammer this point home, because we've gotten up to the first 7-inch. The first 7-inch here is still strictly DIY, you know, recorded in the basement with a 4-track. When it came time to actually release a record, you went to your friend, Joe Snow, who was a fan and a supporter of the group, and the guy at the local record store to put out a record. That is Absolute
Oh,
grassroots and DIY.
can we have the side note? Who funded Joe Snow's portion?
Whom?
The wasn't it like the New Milford Police Department or something like that? Didn't he like make money from getting? The story goes like he made money from being skateboarding and
Oh, that's right.
yes, he basically got arrested while he was a teenager and he was underage and his parents weren't there and he basically won some money and some kind of a falsely imprisonment or something like that. Something, yeah, you know, but he basically got money from the city because of that. You know, he got arrested for skateboarding and that he put his money into making records.
I remember that. Now that you mentioned that, I remember that. I think there might even be a cryptic reference to that on the.
Yeah, I think there is. That's what I say. I think there is a reference.
Well, there you go. Getting harassed by the man does pay off sometimes, I guess.
Yeah. So, but you know, it's like having, going to the source of, you know, the friends who have resources. I mean, I guess we didn't know how to do at the time, you know, but it was like any that period of that there was the 7-inch culture was really exploding because everybody figured out how to make them. I mean, you knew where to go to make them. You know, whatever the companies were that were making them, but it was like everyone did it. Like that's how Merge Records, Superchunk, and all that stuff. They were all doing it. Everyone was doing it. You know, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. I still kind of go back to like, you know, it's you know, it's sort of, yeah, just like it's instantaneous. Like, okay, it's coming, we're recording it next month, it's out, you know, boom, you know, and you got to sell them at gigs and, you know, you sell them at a local record store and that was it, right? It's easy to do, right? You sold out of them and they go, you know, all these famous labels started out that way. You know, I just remember talking to the J Tree guys and that's how they started. Like, you know, like I always try to tell labels, like, remind yourself that's how you started when you sold out that first 300 pressing. Try to get back to that, you know, like how to make it work all the time, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but anyways, it was quickly things were moving, and I think again we had our. I think within a year we had our. It wasn't even a year. We had a second single came out, right? It was the second.
Yep. That was within a year, and you know that's actually I think a really good time to break because we've been at this for an hour already. Time doth fly.
Yes.
So that is a perfect time to break because we are right now at the pure DIY family and friends stage of things. And we're just about to go to the next little step up on the ladder of doing it. So let's call this one an episode and get the people's ears a chance to cool off a little bit and set the stage for episode 2, man. What do you think?
I'm good for it, man. We still got a lot of stories to talk about.
No doubt. No doubt. So we're going to do that. We're going to wrap up this episode of Tent Talks Tunes with Greg Vegas, telling the story of Monsterland and all the peripherals that go with it.
We call Milk Talks, not TED Talks, Milk Talks.
Oh, talk to my lawyers, okay? Just talk to my lawyers, man. It'll be all right. So yeah, man, we're gonna do this.
Okay,
I think,
and I'll find another deep old school T-shirt to wear next time.
Yeah. Right on, man. So stay tuned for the next episode, whether it's here on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. And just for the sake of continuity, we're going to say this is Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.